We've divided time in the same way for millennia. Seconds, minutes, hours, days. But now there are two new categories. Forget months and years. Think before COVID and after COVID. COVID was a torpedo, a bomb, a bolt of lightning that short-circuited pretty much every rhythm in the world. Order turned to chaos. Every day was Blur's day. Now, we not only have to get used to a new rhythm, we have to get used to a new language. Shelter in place, flatten the curve, social distancing, SARS, MERS, N95, PPE. We're swimming in a veritable vegetable soup of acronyms. It's almost like there was a new Big Bang. Everything changed so radically. Okay, that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but it really doesn't feel like it. More than 24 million confirmed COVID cases worldwide, more than 830,000 dead, millions of lost jobs and businesses shuttered. I don't have to remind you. You couldn't forget about it if you wanted to. And when you're talking about something that affects every single person on the planet, perspective can be hard to find. That is where we come in. We're going to escort you through the offices, labs, clinics, and classrooms of the University of Illinois to explore how this venerable institution has risen to the COVID challenge. And rise it has. Doctors, researchers, computer scientists, engineers, and professors are all working on extraordinary things at a remarkable pace. A vaccine in phase 3 trials, a saliva test given 20,000 times a day, computer modeling of what's to come, and nanotechnology that is so complicated it's completely over my head. Well, that doesn't say much, but you get my point. But wait, that's not all. Students and staff have pitched in too. They've become EMTs, fundraisers, authors, and innovators. There's a lot to talk about. Good thing talking is one of my all-time favorite activities. I'm Gwen Macsai. Welcome to Rising to the Challenge, a 6-part podcast from the University of Illinois System and Illinois Public Media. This is episode 1, A Shot in the Arm.
The mystery virus started here in the city of Wuhan. Chinese authorities pinpointing its source to this food market. Those infected are being treated in medical centres, suffering symptoms similar to pneumonia.
We're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
I think Americans should be prepared that they're going to have to hunker down significantly more than we as a country are doing.
Right now, we turn to alarming numbers in the coronavirus pandemic. Those numbers have set records.
The rising number of cases and hospitalizations in many areas are still mounting.
Coronavirus cases continue to climb. Separately, the CDC says it's possible that the number of infections in the U.S. could be 10 times higher than the confirmed case count.
The governor has been preaching the importance of mask usage for months, but that message is gaining urgency as the number of cases across the state continues to rise because of what was described today as people's complacency.
This is a make or break moment for Illinois.
We begin our tour with a stop at the top as we stroll over to the president's office for a chat with Tim Killeen. We arrive early for our interview, so I go to look for the bathroom down the hall. Now, this isn't just any hall. This is a cool, stone-floored, dark hall lined with portraits of all the past presidents, portraits the size of barn doors. It's a little majestic, a little austere, a little grand, and a little imposing. And just when it started to feel a little intimidating, a man came into the hallway from outside, a bit wilted and rumpled from the furnace that is Champaign in August. He was wearing glasses, a blue tie, and a white shirt that matched the silver of his hair. His gentle presence was as unassuming as the portraits were grand. Even though he was, of course, masked, his eyes were bright and he seemed to be in no hurry. "Odd times we're in," he said. "For sure," I replied. I glanced at the Starbucks cup in his hand. There was barista scrawl on the side. It said, Tim. This unhurried, unpretentious, genial man was the president of the University of Illinois system, Tim Killeen. Not at all what I expected for a man who watches over 3 campuses, close to 90,000 students, and has an operating budget of $7 billion. When it comes to the enormous system he runs, one thing President Killeen is most proud of is that it doesn't act like a typical academic, siloed, territorial organization. U of I is well known for the opposite, academic collaboration.
It works across intellectual boundaries like breathing. It's natural here. I've been in other institutions where it's kind of forced from top down, thou shalt work with X and Y, and here it's the custom, the norm to work across intellectual boundaries. And that's how this worked. I call them servant leaders. They're all about service, and it's not about who gets credit for what. It's about identifying a problem that needs solution and working on the solution. Not just framing the problem, but attacking the problem.
And the most urgent problem right now, needless to say, is COVID, on campus, in the community, across the state, and nationally.
We decided to innovate. We decided early on that we couldn't import a solution to this complex problem. We tried to understand in detail the ingress, egress, cleaning, ventilation, hospital access, public health strictures, etc.
And boy, did they innovate, developing a saliva test that was up and running in 6 weeks. Now they can test up to 20,000 people a day at a low cost with results delivered right to your cell phone between a few hours and a few days. There's contact tracing and, of course, quarantining. It's an exhaustive effort. And did I mention the vaccine in Phase 3 trials at University of Illinois Chicago? There's a lot going on.
No credit accrues to any one person, certainly not the president. I'm here to help everybody else do things. And administrations that do that are more successful. They're just fundamentally more successful. You generate more loyalty, you generate more spirit, the morale is higher.
And was it a financial strain?
Oh, absolutely. It still is a financial strain. The hit of COVID to the University of Illinois system through the end of June is about $175 million. We've had to slow things down in terms of expenditures. We've reduced our tuition for the new students coming in because we don't want to, pass the burden to them. And this will be the 6th year then of no tuition increases. We created an emergency fund for students whose parents lost their jobs. They lost their jobs. Suddenly they were in a completely different financial circumstance. So there's been a lot of financial planning and hits that we've taken. We want to be known at the end of all of this about how well we took care of our people.
Which includes President Killeen's concern about increased stress during the pandemic.
I worry a little bit about mental health for our whole community. I worry about the pressure on the young people and their families and their concerns and the isolation that everybody's been experiencing. I know just from myself, I'm a bit stir crazy. I'm really concerned. So we're going to have a summit on that topic in September. So we're really going to look at how we can deal with issues of mental health in a community this complex and this large.
President Killeen has much on his plate, and it can keep him up at night. But as a scientist himself, a geophysicist and engineer, he's reassured by the data that drives the university's course of action.
What's the word? Nerd. I'm a data nerd. So I like to look at evidence, and so I pore over those kinds of things. And so I'm not an epidemiologist, but I've learned a lot about this field now, and also about the DNA instrumentation and so forth. So I think data looking at data, talking it through, understanding what it's telling you, critiquing it to see if there may be some weaknesses there, or maybe, I think that is has been helpful, because we took action, not just roll with its punches, but take it on and give it no place to hide. And we'll look back on this period and say this was a fine hour for the institution.
Before we left his office, I had one more important, burning question for U of I President Tim Killeen. Are Americans completely charmed by his lovely Welsh accent?
Oh, you talk to my wife about that. She thinks I get away with murder because of my accent. Yeah, and I do. I acknowledge it. I do think sometimes people stop and listen because of the accent more than they would otherwise. And so certainly my wife, who's from California, thinks that that's a big part of the reason I'm sitting in this chair here in this lovely office as a president. But despite all of that, I'm going to do my best. That's for sure. Whatever that means. Yeah.
Oh, and by the by, one of the ways President Killeen relaxes, in all of his spare time, is by playing the guitar. In fact, you're listening to him right now as we leave his office for our next stop, Chicago. The one thing everyone is waiting for, and when I say everyone, I mean pretty much everyone on the planet, is a COVID vaccine. With that in hand, or maybe an arm, we can start to get back to the way things were BC, before COVID. At the moment, there are more than 150 vaccines in various stages of testing, but fewer than 10 have made it to phase 3 trials. Remember, phase 3 means that the vaccine is ready to be tested on thousands of people, and if successful, can be approved by the FDA and mass-produced. One of the most promising vaccines to make it to phase 3 trials is from the biotech company Moderna. It's been shepherded through research and development by Richard Novak, head of infectious disease at the University of Illinois, Chicago. This whole thing kind of sounds like a plot of a superhero movie. The health of the entire world, to say nothing of the global economy, depends on one thing, a successful vaccine. And Richard Novak thinks he might have it. No pressure.
Yeah, it's really been pretty stressful. There's not a day that I don't go home and say, I just wish this would go away. And I could go and have a vacation, which most of us haven't had anyway, but it's been really stressful because this is Operation Warp Speed.
Warp Speed is the name of the U.S. government program created to get a COVID vaccine up and running as fast as possible. But I believe it also may describe Dr. Novak's blood pressure.
And that means they want it to happen yesterday.
If you've ever seen a picture of COVID-19, you know that it looks like a ball with spikes sticking out of it. Dr. Novak explained that those spikes are proteins, and that those proteins are the dangerous parts of the virus because those are the guys that invade our cells and make us sick.
So the Moderna vaccine is a novel vaccine designed because it uses messenger RNA to code for a viral protein. So the goal of vaccines are for our bodies to make an immune response to that protein, mostly antibodies, which would bind to that protein and block it from attaching to our cells.
You'd think that figuring out how to make the vaccine would be the hard part of this Herculean effort, but that is only step one. Then there's all the testing.
Most people don't know what it takes to do clinical trials, and it's a major job. It requires a lot of expertise and an infrastructure that involves staff who know how to do the clinical trials and collect the data from the trials. It's very different than taking care of patients Clinical research involves much more attention to detail, actually.
So much detail. When a sample is taken from one room to another, it has to be logged out of the first room with the date and exact time, then logged back into the second when it arrives down the hall. And that's just one example. But Dr. Novak is used to such painstaking detail work. For the past 3 decades, he's been researching HIV and an HIV vaccine at UIC, which means that the vaccine development and testing infrastructure was already in place. That made it relatively easy to switch his focus of study from HIV to COVID. And Dr. Novak is optimistic that we may see positive results from the trials as early as December. It just depends on enrolling people into the study who are at high risk of getting the disease.
People who are at risk just by nature of what they do, encountering the virus in their daily lives. And by doing that, we hope that we'll get those clinical endpoint infections and that can help us answer the question. If we get them more quickly, we'll have the answer more quickly.
The success of the vaccine depends on more than one factor, of course. It depends on enrolling people from minority populations who've historically been distrusting of the medical community. It depends on making the vaccine shelf-stable to travel to countries without dependable electricity. And it depends on being able to mass manufacture the final product. But of course, none of this compares to the single most important factor in this whole race to produce a successful vaccine. People actually have to take it.
There's so much misinformation on the internet, or disinformation that related to the anti-vaxxers and such, that people, they tend to believe that rather than believe science, and so they don't take the vaccine, and they forget the great, vaccines have probably saved more lives than any other medical intervention on the planet. In fact, you could pick just about any vaccine and will have saved more lives than any other medical intervention.
When we spoke with Dr. Novak in mid-August, recruitment was already underway for the Phase 3 trials, and volunteers would soon be rolling into the UIC labs and clinics. Dr. Novak was eager to get the ball rolling.
I take great pride in having the ability to do this work and having the expertise to make this to be part of the solution to this problem that's affecting the whole world. And I think that it brings much deserving credit to the University of Illinois that we are, we have great capabilities here and great science, and it often doesn't get recognized, but I think this is an opportunity for us to showcase that we can do all this.
As we leave Dr. Novak's office, we're itching to get into the lab and clinics where all the magic will soon be happening. Unfortunately, Dr. Novak has to jump on a call. Fortunately, grad student Nick Ginas can't say no when Dr. Novak asks him to show us around in his stead. Glad we ran into you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as we make our way down the hall, I realize on the one day we're recording, I have worn my orthotics, which make a lot of unwanted noise. Rookie mistake.
Well, I have to walk on tiptoe because my shoes make a lot of noise.
Mine are worse. So.
Fortunately, I'm not alone. Our guide has even squeakier shoes.
They're very noisy.
And why are the shoes so noisy again?
They got rubber soles, so they're camper brand. So they're famous for their non-slip soles.
And they're not slipping.
No, they're not slipping at all.
A few hallways later, we arrive at the clinic. It's quiet. Not great for radio. But this is the calm before the storm, the room where it happens. Soon it will be a virtual hive of activity. But for now, there's only a skeletal staff manning the phone that isn't ringing. There's a wall of boxes filled with PPE, multiple darkened exam rooms, and rolling blood pressure machines standing in a row like a regiment of soldiers at the ready. It may sound corny, but I don't really think it's an exaggeration to say that the world is waiting with bated breath for the results of the research that will be coming out of this clinic. Tall order. But first things first, gotta get it up and running.
It's already went from, 3 weeks ago we weren't too crazy, just sort of general paperwork, and now this week is, I've got 8 things on my agenda to get done. So.
Before we left, we asked Nick to briefly show us the lab, where the researchers are a little surprised to see people with microphones walking in. We didn't want to interrupt them. They seemed busy pipetting red cell growth solution into test tubes. But after a minute or two of talking, one scientist summed up the feeling everyone in the department had expressed to us in one way or another.
And then bottom line is we all do our part to make sure at the end we can have effective vaccine or treatment for COVID-19 and other disease that we encounter.
We thanked the researchers, our gracious hosts, Dr. Novak and Nick Ginas, and snaked our way through the hallways out onto the city streets. But we'll be back to check in on our friends at the Illinois College of Medicine to get an update about the Moderna vaccine Phase 3 trials. Some people are running ragged in their efforts to prevent, contain, test, and eliminate the coronavirus at the University of Illinois. And some people are just running and running and running. Literally. In an effort to raise money for the Champaign County United Way's COVID Relief Fund, University of Illinois women's tennis coach Evan Clark decided to do something he loves, pound the pavement. But he didn't just say run a marathon. No, he ran the equivalent of 18 of them in 1 month. Let me help you with the math here. If you run 14 miles on the 14th and 25 miles on the 25th, at the end of 1 month, your total is 465 miles in 30 days. Are you the happiest man on the planet that April only has 30 days?
Yeah, I did think of that as well. I ran 30 on the 30th, and then a couple days later, just to test myself, I ran another 30.
Sitting in empty seats outside 12 beautiful but empty tennis courts, with the ever-present construction machinery in the distance, Coach Clark explained that long-distance running is a personal passion. In this case, really long distance. But he claims he came to it late.
My dad was always a runner, and I never could get into it. I thought, I was lazy as a kid, and even...
Okay, I find that hard to believe. I'm just going to say,
go
on record as saying, I find that hard to believe.
Super, super lazy, and my dad would try to get me to track and run with him. I never would, and then my early 20s, something switched after I quit playing tennis and really got into it, and it's a passion for me. I think it's really healthy for me, just mentally. It's someplace where I can get away for an hour and get my thoughts together. I'm always, I feel like I'm a better person, better dad, and better coach once I get one in. So, yeah, some people maybe say I overdid it a little bit in the mileage, which they're probably right, but it was just fun, and obviously I wouldn't do that every month of the year.
Okay, I'm just going to say, personally, I may want to get my thoughts together over something like an ice cream sundae, but I digress. This March, as we all know, wasn't just another month of the year. University of Illinois, along with almost every other college and university in the country, shut its doors. No more in-person classes, no more dorms, no more Big Ten tennis. It was confusing, sad, and isolating.
I wasn't coaching. The whole team was home. We weren't practicing, and I was home, and we couldn't do anything. We couldn't recruit, so I had a lot of time on my hands. So I said, hey, I'm going to pick up running again and get some mileage in. So I did it for a couple weeks, and it was good, but I wasn't really running for a purpose. And then a friend of mine said, hey, have you ever heard of the month running challenge? I think what it was called. And I said no. What is it? And he says, you run the mileage on that day, and you see how long you can go. So I said, I had built up a pretty good base. It had been about almost a month since quarantine hit, and so I had built up a pretty good base, and I felt good about it.
The idea clicked. The gauntlet had been thrown.
My wife and I, we've been here for about 4 years now, and we've been trying to find we've been really wanting to do something to give back. The community's fantastic here. They've been really supportive of us since day one. Athletics, academic community, just we love it here. And so to add the piece of raising money and donating for I donated $1 for each mile I ran, and then encouraged other people to do that every day. And I think we raised close to $15,000 in just that month period, which I was really happy about.
Every penny went to the Champaign County United Way COVID Relief Fund, which helps feed those facing food insecurity, prepare children for success, and connect those in financial distress with resources to pay bills and stay in their homes. But even when the challenge ended, Coach Clark's mileage did not.
So just yesterday, actually, I got to 2,000 miles from quarantine running. So from March 15th to August 20th, I got 2,000 miles in.
Do you have another one of these months in you? Do you have another 65-mile month in you?
I think so. Definitely.
You said that so quickly.
Yeah. I think because my mind is working the way of I'm so excited to be back right now, and I'm thinking how excited I am to have the team back on campus and to get back to practicing and getting back together. And so if that's taken away again, I think I'll need a pretty good mental space or a pretty good release.
In addition to the clarity the coach gets from running and the money he was able to raise, there's one more important reason he pushes himself toward these tough finish lines.
It's all mental. It's, you probably your brain and your legs are telling you to stop, and are you gonna have the ability to trick your brain and talk yourself into it? And a lot of the times that's what tennis is too, so yeah, of course I think it helps me as a coach just because I think players see what I've done, and obviously they see the work I put in, the discipline that it takes, and the mental aspect. So I think they know that I can help after going through something like that.
We said goodbye to Coach Clark and climbed back into the car, which was blistering hot. We cranked the AC, pulled out of the parking lot, out of the university, and then out of Champaign to head home. But we'll be back soon for the next episode of Rising to the Challenge. It's called Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Join us. Rising to the Challenge was produced and engineered by Libby Foster, with editing help from Shayna Roth. Special thanks to Tim Killeen, Moss Bresnahan, Lily Duncanson, Laura Clower, Robin Kaler, Kirsten Ruby, David Mercer, and Tom Hardy. Rising to the Challenge is a production of the University of Illinois System and Illinois Public Media. I'm Gwen Macsai. Thanks for listening.